When people think about Patton's Third Army, the first thing that comes to mind is speed. From the moment they hit the European continent, this force seemed to move like a storm, sweeping across France and into Germany with a relentless momentum that left both the enemy and other Allied units struggling to keep up. What made Patton's army unique wasn't just the fact that they advanced quickly, but the way they did it. Aggressively, decisively, and often with an almost intuitive sense of where they needed to go next. While other armies were tied down by cautious planning, waiting for reinforcements or for their flanks to be secured, Patton's units pressed forward, prioritizing movement and opportunity above all else. This approach was particularly critical when it came to liberating prisoners of war. Many of the POWs held by the Germans were trapped in camps located deep behind front lines, often cut off from supply lines and left in deteriorating conditions. The speed of Patton's advance meant that these camps were reached before the Germans could execute mass evacuations or, in some cases, before the Guards could even react to the approaching Americans. In many instances, prisoners who might have faced death marches or prolonged captivity were simply there, waiting when Third Army units arrived. This rapid movement wasn't just luck. It was a product of careful planning, innovative use of armored units, and Patton's personal philosophy. He believed in pushing the army to its limits, in keeping momentum at all costs. Tanks and mechanized infantry were allowed to advance ahead of slower-moving supply columns, creating a kind of spearhead that could cut through enemy lines and capture territory faster than anyone expected. Reconnaissance units scouted aggressively, mapping out weak points in German defenses and identifying key roads, bridges, and rail lines that could support a continuous advance. This meant that when news of a POW camp or a stranded unit of Allied soldiers reached the Third Army, the response could be immediate. There was no waiting for red tape or formal orders. Commanders on the ground had the freedom to adjust and move. In practical terms, this made a massive difference. Entire camps that might have been abandoned or relocated were liberated intact, and thousands of soldiers who had endured months or even years of imprisonment suddenly found themselves free. The aggressive pace also created a psychological advantage. German forces, already stretched thin and demoralized, struggled to mount coherent resistance against a force that seemed to appear wherever they were weakest. The surprise and confusion generated by Patton's rapid push often meant that camp guards surrendered without a fight, too stunned to resist. For the POWs themselves, it was more than just a matter of timing. It was a matter of survival. Many had been malnourished, sick, or subjected to harsh conditions, and the speed with which Third Army units arrived often meant the difference between life and death. Medics, supply officers, and engineers moved in quickly to provide immediate care, while combat units secured the perimeter, ensuring that no counterattack could threaten the newly liberated prisoners. Perhaps most remarkable was how this strategy created a ripple effect across the war's final months. While other Allied units were advancing more slowly, often consolidating gains or preparing for set-piece battles, Patton's Third Army kept pushing forward, continuously finding new POW camps and refugee groups along the way. Each rapid thrust not only freed more soldiers but also created intelligence opportunities, revealing hidden German positions, supply depots, and defensive plans that could be exploited in subsequent operations. In many ways, the speed of Third Army operations became self-reinforcing. The faster they moved, the more they found, and the more they found, the greater their operational advantage became. In short, the Third Army's rapid and aggressive advance wasn't just a tactical choice. It was a lifeline for thousands of POWs. By moving faster than anyone expected, Patton's forces turned the chaos of retreating German armies into an opportunity for liberation. Speed became their weapon, and in the process, it saved lives, disrupted enemy plans, and cemented the Third Army's reputation as the fastest, most daring, and most effective American force in Europe. One of the defining qualities of Patton's Third Army was not just its speed, but its remarkable flexibility. On a battlefield where chaos was the only constant, the ability to adapt quickly became a force multiplier, allowing the army to seize opportunities that more rigid units would have missed. Patton himself believed in empowering his commanders to think independently, to assess situations as they unfolded, and to take decisive action without waiting for orders from far-off headquarters. This philosophy created a culture in which initiative was not only encouraged, it was expected. And when it came to freeing prisoners of war, that initiative had profound consequences. Across the European theater, German forces were constantly on the move, retreating from some areas while reinforcing others. POW camps were often relocated, abandoned, or hidden deep within forests and small towns. For an army advancing with rigid, step-by-step orders, keeping up with such fluid situations would have been nearly impossible. But Patton's approach was different. His units were trained to act on the best available information and to push forward wherever there was a chance to strike a decisive blow. Reconnaissance reports, local intelligence from civilians, and even rumors picked up along the road could trigger immediate action. A division commander didn't have to wait for formal approval to investigate a possible camp or pursue a fleeing enemy column. In Patton's army, initiative was a tool of liberation. This flexibility also allowed the Third Army to exploit weaknesses in German defenses that might have been overlooked by slower, more cautious forces. For example, small armored columns could veer off main roads to bypass strongpoints, uncovering POW camps tucked away behind secondary routes. Infantry units could shift quickly to support these maneuvers or respond to unexpected resistance, creating a level of responsiveness that the enemy simply could not match. It wasn't just about moving fast. It was about moving intelligently, reading the battlefield, and making split-second decisions that maximized the army's reach. In practice, this meant that prisoners who might otherwise have been forced to endure months of deprivation suddenly found themselves liberated because a Third Army commander had spotted an opportunity and acted immediately. The results of this flexible strategy were dramatic. Third Army units often arrived at camps that were moments away from being abandoned, rescuing soldiers before the Germans could evacuate them or destroy evidence of their imprisonment. In some cases, the very act of rapidly advancing into enemy-held territory caused German guards to surrender preemptively, knowing that resistance was futile. The initiative shown by Patton's commanders didn't just save time. It saved lives. Medics, supply teams, and engineers were often deployed within hours of the army's arrival, stabilizing prisoners who had been weakened by months of captivity. The coordination of quick decision-making and immediate support ensured that the Third Army didn't just liberate POWs. It restored them to safety with a speed and efficiency that set the army apart. Flexibility also fostered creativity in problem-solving. Engineers could quickly repair bridges or clear obstacles to keep the army moving, while intelligence officers pieced together fragmented reports to identify the locations of hidden camps. Local civilians often provided crucial guidance, and the willingness of Third Army leaders to act on that information created a feedback loop in which speed, adaptability, and local knowledge reinforced each other. This approach was fundamentally different from armies that relied strictly on preset plans or hierarchies of command, and it gave the Third Army a persistent advantage in reaching POWs before the Germans could react. Ultimately, the culture of initiative and flexible strategy was a force of liberation. It transformed a fast-moving army into a nimble, responsive machine capable of making the most of every opportunity on the battlefield. Patton's willingness to let commanders think independently, to act decisively, and to exploit fleeting chances directly translated into the liberation of tens of thousands of prisoners, where other forces might have hesitated or missed critical moments. The Third Army's adaptability allowed them to turn every obstacle into an opportunity, every report into action, and every advance into a life-saving mission. In the end, flexibility was more than just a tactic. It was a philosophy, one that turned Patton's Third Army into a liberating force that moved with purpose, intelligence, and an unwavering drive to save those trapped behind enemy lines. What truly set Patton's Third Army apart was not just speed or flexibility, but an extraordinary level of coordination and logistical efficiency. On paper, moving an army hundreds of miles through war-torn territory is an almost impossible task, especially when tanks, artillery, supply trucks, and infantry all need to keep pace. In practice, however, the Third Army had a system that made such movement not just possible but remarkably effective. Every advance, every maneuver, and every liberation of POWs depended on the ability to keep forces supplied, organized, and in constant motion. Without this backbone, speed and initiative alone could have been wasted. Patton understood that an army could only move as fast as its supply lines allowed. Fuel, ammunition, food, and medical supplies had to reach units on the front without delay. This required meticulous planning and a willingness to innovate. Engineers built bridges, cleared roads, and repaired rail lines almost as quickly as the army moved along them. Supply officers coordinated convoys that snaked behind the spearhead units, ensuring that armored columns never ran dry of fuel and that infantry had the ammunition they needed to hold captured ground. When it came to liberating POWs, this logistical efficiency meant that the army could maintain momentum while simultaneously providing immediate care for those they freed. Medics, field kitchens, and transport vehicles were often ready within hours of liberation, creating a seamless transition from captivity to safety. The Third Army's coordination went beyond supply lines. Patton excelled at integrating different branches of the military into a unified fighting force. Armor, infantry, artillery, reconnaissance, and engineers worked in close tandem, each understanding the other's roles and timing. Tanks could punch through enemy lines while infantry followed closely to secure territory, and artillery units provided support without slowing the advance. Reconnaissance teams scouted ahead to identify dangers and opportunities, while engineers prepared the path for the main forces. This level of synchronization allowed the army to maintain its extraordinary pace while still responding to unexpected challenges. When a POW camp was discovered off the main route, units could be redirected efficiently without losing momentum, ensuring that liberation missions were not delayed by logistical bottlenecks. Communication played a vital role as well. Radio networks, messengers, and liaison officers kept units in contact, allowing commanders to make rapid decisions in real time. If a division stumbled upon a large POW camp or needed medical support, orders and resources could be dispatched almost instantly. This kind of connectivity meant that no single unit was isolated and that the army could operate as a cohesive whole, despite covering hundreds of miles in enemy territory. The result was a system in which every soldier, from the frontline infantryman to the supply officer at the rear, contributed to a mission larger than themselves: the liberation of Allied prisoners. Logistics also gave the Third Army an edge in sustaining continuous operations. While other forces occasionally paused to regroup or resupply, Patton's units were able to keep pressing forward. Bridges were repaired overnight, roads cleared of debris, and supply convoys constantly adjusted routes to avoid bottlenecks. This relentless ability to sustain operations not only maximized the territory covered but also increased the number of POWs reached. Camps that might have been missed by a slower army were found, and prisoners who might have suffered longer captivity were liberated sooner. In the end, superior coordination and logistics were more than technical advantages. They were life-saving tools. The Third Army's ability to synchronize movement, supplies, and support ensured that speed and initiative could be fully exploited. Each liberated POW reflected not just bravery and strategy on the battlefield, but the invisible network of planning, communication, and supply that made such feats possible. Patton's army demonstrated that an army marches not just on its feet, but on its organization. And when executed with skill and precision, that organization could transform rapid advances into waves of freedom for thousands of trapped soldiers. The Third Army's success was a testament to the power of preparation meeting opportunity. With coordination and logistics as its foundation, the army could move fast, adapt to any situation, and reach prisoners before the enemy could react. In a war defined by chaos and uncertainty, Patton's meticulous planning and relentless execution turned a massive military machine into a liberating force capable of achieving what no other U.S. force could, freeing more POWs than anyone else in Europe.